Yes, Rabbi Wilhelm, I'm here 50 years. The Rebbe sent me to the capital city in Minnesota 50 years ago. And also that means, as far as we are concerned, that the last time I was in 770 for any day in Tishrei, any time in Tishrei, was over 50 years ago. So you might think to yourself that, well, over 50 years ago, he probably doesn't know anything, and maybe I don't know too much. But I certainly do know what happened years ago when I came. I'd like to share with you some thoughts that came to my mind today. Rabbi Wilhelm asked me, I think last evening, and I spent some time today going over in my mind what I remember, what I don't remember, and I hope that it will be useful to you and useful to myself also, because when you think of things that happened, and especially things like being with the Rebbe and close to the Rebbe, etc., certainly awakens and arouses within myself, I'm sure within others, a strong feeling of commitment to Torah, mitzvahs, an ongoing commitment to do everything right as it should be. Having said that, Rabbi Wilhelm has asked me to speak about the month of Tishrei with the Rebbe at 770. He didn't give it that exact title. That's the title I'm giving it, the month of Tishrei. And so I will begin by saying as follows, asking a question. I'm not looking for an answer. The question is, when does the month of Tishrei begin? And you will say to me, look into a calendar, and you'll see the month of Tishrei begins on the first day of Tishrei. Of course, you are correct, but for our purposes, you are far from correct. Because Tishrei, as we talk about Tishrei by the Rebbe in 770, is more than 29 or 30 days or a certain amount of days. It's not only a period of time, but it is a very special time, a season in every year. And actually, Tishrei, the month of Tishrei, begins not on the first day of Tishrei, not even on Erev, not even on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, but a long time before. Certainly the entire month of Elul is part of the month of Tishrei. And actually, I would say, if I were to be asked, when does the month of Tishrei begin? I would say it begins on the day when on the Shabbos.
I just pressed the recorder, another recorder. Okay, it's fine.
It begins on the Shabbos when we bench Rosh Chodesh Elul. When we bench Rosh Chodesh, we bless the month on the Shabbos before the first day of Rosh Chodesh. And actually, the previous Rebbe speaks about this in Siches, that when it came the day, the Shabbos, when we bless the new month of Elul, the previous Rebbe uses a term that even fish in the sea, even fish in the rivers begin to shake and begin to be more careful what they do, etc. And I want to begin with a very personal item that has to do with me, that I learned that Tishrei, this special season, begins when we bench Rosh Chodesh on that Shabbos. Because when I came here, again, 50 years ago, after I was here, I think for just 1 year, and it happened to be Shabbos V'Vorchim Elul, and I have to tell you the truth, that I didn't really think of it as being different than any other Shabbos V'Vorchim, any other Shabbos when you bless a new month. And that Shabbos, I was invited to be present, to participate in a bar mitzvah, a relative on the East Coast. And the Shabbos was Shabbos with the lading of the Torah, etc. And Sunday was to be a big party. And my plan was to go for Shabbos and for Sunday. And then for some reason I thought it over, and I don't know exactly why, but I came to the conclusion that I'm not going to go for Shabbos. I'm going to stay here for Shabbos. I'm going to stay with my people for Shabbos, and I'll go Sunday morning. I took a flight, and I don't think I had any very special, pressing reason to do that, but that's what I did. I stayed here for Shabbos. I stayed in my shul for Shabbos. Sunday morning I took a flight, and from there, from where I was on the East Coast, somebody took me. I went to New York. I was in Crown Heights, and I spent a day in 770. And I would write to the Rebbe very frequently, and I wrote to the Rebbe exactly what had happened. I told the Rebbe that I was planning to come in for Shabbos, and I didn't. And I came for Sunday. I came on Sunday to be here for a day or so. And the Rebbe responded, writing, of course, in his Ksav Yad Kodesh, in his holy hand script. He wrote on the paper I wrote. He said to me, what you did was a very good thing. Dover Nochid. It was a good thing that you did, that you stayed in your synagogue, in your shul, and with your congregation for Shabbos. And he wrote, the Hebrew words he used were, Shabbos Kodesh, Mevorchim HaChodesh Elul, Harav Tzorich Liyos Im Ke'ilasei. on the Shabbos when we bless the new month of Elul, the rabbi, the Rav, should be with his people. So that's how I learned it on a personal basis. And now I'll take you back to the years where I came to Lubavitch. I came to Lubavitch 770, is Lubavitch. And I came to Lubavitch in the year 1958, 17 years old, 17 turning 18, in the year Tavshin Yud Ches. And actually that year, Tavshin Yud Ches, Rosh Hashanah, was a special year, but I wasn't really into, I came after the holy days. I went to Montreal, studied in Montreal for about a year, a little bit more than a year. Then I came to New York, and the rebbe said to me, I want you to continue learning here in 770. Now to continue learning in 770, I was married a few years later, Tavshin Chav Daled, and 64, and then 2 years later, the Rebbe told me to study in the Kollel. 2 years later, the Rebbe told me to take a position, and he told me he wants me to take a position to become the rabbi in St. Paul, Minnesota, and so I've been here for 50 years. When Elul came, the month of Elul in 770, going back to those years, the excitement is perhaps not the best word to use, but the very special feeling of a special time that was felt in everything the Rebbe did. And again, on a personal note, the Rebbe used to have yechidas, would see people 3 times a week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday usually. There were certain times when the Rebbe did not see people. Obviously, he was very busy, and that was the month of Tishrai, month of Nisan, and the month of Elul. He did not generally see people. But in each of these months, there were certain days when, for whatever reason, there are certain people who did go in. So anybody who needed to see the Rebbe for a special reason was able to go in usually. My birth date, my Yom Haledes, is on the 22nd day of Elul, and I had the great zechus, the great merit that every year I was there, I visited with the Rebbe Yechidus to receive a personal bracha from the Rebbe. And it happened one year, I can't tell you exactly which year it was, I think it was Tavshin Chaf Aleph, when the Rebbe, which would be at the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, when I was told by the secretary that there are people going in tonight, but it is so full, the Yechidus, that there's not a minute for you to go in and ask the Rebbe for a blessing. I'm certainly not going to argue with that. My argument wouldn't have helped anyways. So I wrote a note to the Rebbe. Actually, there were some things I wanted to ask the Rebbe anyways. And I wrote to the Rebbe. I said I thought I'd be coming to visit the Rebbe, but I thought I can't. And so I'm asking the Rebbe for bracha, a blessing for my new year, for many years, God willing, B'ezras Hashem Yisparach. And I also asked him a few other items. The next morning, when it was later, I think later in the day or the next morning, the Rebbe's personal secretary, Rabbi Chadakov, called me over, and he says, the Rebbe handed me your note, and he told me as follows. He said to me with these words, Talmud in the yeshiva, a student in the yeshiva, should come in once a year to receive a bracha, which of course made me feel very good. And the Rebbe said I should come into him to receive his bracha. And the Rebbe said, however, the questions that I'd asked in that letter, he would answer through the secretary. And I did go in, and the first thing the Rebbe said to me, I hope you received the answers I gave to you. And the Rebbe gave me a bracha for the Yom Haledes. And as Elul continued, it became more, we could feel Elul and Melech HaYeshev Al Kisei. We're coming close to a very, very important day. Elul, of course, is full with Melech Basara, the king is in the field, and this is a time of the cities of refuge, the cities of being secure, of being miklat, and we learned more Torah as we came close to Rosh Hashanah. Orchim, guests came from all over the world, from Eretz Yisrael. They came, and there were special classes, and the Rebbe would come out, I believe, quite a few years, where he'd come out in slichas, and during the days of slichas, to say a maimah. I think he said certainly at least a few times. I remember on the third day of slichas, third day being a very special day, we would give over a discourse, and the Olam would come, and of course this was people coming from Eretz Yisrael, so they were first of all very excited by coming, and very full of enthusiasm, and certainly that enthusiasm was certainly very contagious.
I'm sorry. I'd like to ask everybody, please don't leave your questions to the end, only because I want to give Rabbi zeilingold breathers in between. I don't want him to just speak for 45 minutes. I want everybody, write your questions now as he speaks, so I could give him a breather from time to time. It's 8:45.
And as it came closer to Rosh Hashanah, the excitement and the enthusiasm and the strong feeling of Elul and preparation for Elul and doing better and finding good things became more and more obvious. And then, as Elul continued, the Sliches, the last days of Elul, Sliches. And the first night, the first Sliches said, at midnight, after 1 o'clock in the morning, you come to 770, and 770 was packed, of course. Every place was taken, and the Chazan, the Sliches. And I happen to know people who had the opportunity, they knew they had the opportunity to go to 770 once a year. I know people who chose to be there the night of Sliches, even though the Rebbe didn't speak and didn't give a public address, but just to be there with the people and have the feeling, the first night of Slichas, getting ready, and that was for everybody. And then, when they would finish the Slichas, everybody turned it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would turn to go out, and as he go out, he made a motion with his hand that everybody should sing together. 1,000 people singing, and of course, as the years grew, the crowd grew, etc. And that was the night of Slichas, and it came Erev Rosh Hashanah. Every Rosh Hashanah, for Rosh Hashanah, we have the custom, we have the minhag to write a pigeon to the Rebbe. Pigeon nefesh, peinun. Pigeon nefesh means we write to the Rebbe, we give our names, and we ask the Rebbe to pray for us, and we ask the Rebbe to give us a bracha for the new year. And to write a pigeon nefesh is a special minhag of all Hasidim, I believe, to write a pigeon nefesh to their Rebbe. And the Rebbe would receive, even going back to that time, which was 1950, 58, 59, 60, thousands and thousands and thousands of pigeonis. And when the Rebbe went on Rosh Hashanah, walked to the bima to blow the shofars, I'll tell you about it in a moment or two, somebody brought with packages and packages and packages of pigeonis. And I'll tell you something I happen to remember, and that is, we knew at that time, in those years, the Tafshin Yutes, the end of what we call the Yuds, beginning of the Chavs, 58, 59, 60, 61, we knew that when the Rebbe received a letter from anybody, or a note from anybody, people could send in notes every day by putting in the office, not the Rebbe's office, in the secretary's office. The Merkers could give the Rebbe a note, and the Rebbe would open it himself. And the Rebbe told us one time that he had so many pigeonis, he brought them to put by the blowing of the shofar, and he read as much as he could at different times. He would always read them by the oil. But he did mention that he reads the pigeonis in his room on Yom Kippur, between Mosef and Mincha, and he said, I read them sitting at the table where my father-in-law, the Rebbe, said Chasidus, and we knew from that in the Rebbe's room there's a table from his predecessor from the previous Rebbe. And so we wrote up pigeonis. And then on Erev Rosh Hashanah, we would go to the cemetery, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, to visit the grave of Tzaddik. We would be by the previous Rebbe's grave and to say prayers. And then come back to 770. And the previous Rebbe writes special preparations, what we should do on Erev Rosh Hashanah, what we should do, what we should not do, that we should have the feeling of getting ready for Rosh Hashanah already by midday, and then coming into Shul of Rosh Hashanah in the evening for Ma'ariv. Obviously, of course, the place was full. The Rebbe came in, and how did we know when to start? To start the Ma'ariv. Before we started with Ma'ariv, the Rebbe would make a motion with his hand, and the Olam everybody would sing together. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Ata, our Father, our King, you are our Father. We have no other King except for you. That is Rosh Hashanah at night, and then Rosh Hashanah at day. The Rebbe blew the shofar. He blew the first set of the shofar being blown. When the bracha is made, that is before the Shemoneh Esrei. That later part was blown by somebody else. The Rebbe would go with the word. This is what is blown at the bima, on the bima, and the Rebbe just to be there was a sight that is. There are no words in the dictionary to could explain the as we saw the Rebbe's face and blowing shofar, knowing if you learn just a little bit of Hasidus Kabbalah, what the blowing of the shofar means in a deeper sense. And the Rebbe taking the shofars and standing and putting his talis over all the pajonos and saying the brachas was a sight that once a person saw that sight, it would never, could possibly never leave their mind. Now I'll tell you, the first time that I was there, the first Rosh Hashanah I was there, was Tavshin Yutes, and it so happens that at that time, the place of the shul, which is facing 770, if you face the house 770, immediately on the left side, that was not yet built up. And it was called a shalash. It was like a sukkah. It was like a sukkah. And the top of it was really what you put on top of a sukkah board, is nothing more than that. But on the side, on the walls were not built up either. There was wire netting from the ground way up. And the first time I was there, and I'm saying the Shemoneh Esrei, and when the Chazan said the Shemoneh Esrei, the Chazan was repeating Shemoneh Esrei, and then he finished the Kedusha, and suddenly I heard a rattling sound. And I could not, what is it? There's a rattling sound, and I turn around, and I see hundreds of people climbing up this wire netting. Why would they be climbing up the wire netting? Well, they were climbing up the wire netting to be able to find a place from where they would be able to see the Rebbe below the Tkiyos. Because even though the crowd at that time was certainly not as big as we go into later years, but even at that time, it was overcrowded, overcrowded, and everybody wanted to see the Rebbe.
Would you like a cup of water?
No, thank you very much.
$8.50.
And indeed, as the Rebbe blew the shofar, everybody watched and everybody saw, and you could see the tense feeling that was within everybody. And the Rebbe Rosh Hashanah was very serious, but the end of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe would farbrengen, as he did at the end of every Yontif, and the farbrengen was that before the shkir, before sunset, he would come in, wash his hand, people washed, and the Rebbe benched. And the farbrengen, as I remember, was not a long farbrengen. It was mostly, the Rebbe, of course, said a discourse. He gave a maimer, usually a long maimer. And they sang the nigunim, the melodies of Rabbi Nisyenu, of all the rabbeim, with perhaps some other items. And then the Rebbe would make the Havdalah and give out Kosher Bracha, which the Rebbe did many times, and that is a story in itself, giving out Kosher Bracha, and his cup was refilled many, many times over. And as he gave out from the cup from which he'd made the benching on the Birkas HaMazim, people came in who had not been in 770, and took so long to do it that people came in from other towns. They came in from Connecticut, they came in from New Jersey, and the Kosher Bracha, actually a discussion perhaps for another time, because after every Yontif there was Kosher Bracha.
You have a question, Rabbi zeilingold.
Okay.
In those years, how often did the Rebbe farbrengen in Elul and Tishrei?
The Rebbe at that time farbrengen generally, I don't remember being special farbrengens. Chayel, the Rebbe farbrengen when it was Shabbos. I don't remember that if it was in the week, that if it was a weekday, that he did farbrengen weekdays. He did farbrengen the weekdays. In later years, the Rebbe began to farbrengen many more times than he farbrengen in the earlier years. In what we call in the earlier years, the farbrengen was every Shabbos of V'achim, and of course every what we call Yom Pagra. But the Rebbe did add many farbrengens afterwards, and in Elul, again, Shabbos, it was a Shabbos. If there were Urchim there, then just about every Shabbos Urchim were there, he would farbrengen. But again, I mentioned in Sichas, he would say a maimer. I do not remember that in other days in Elul, he would make a special farbrengen.
How about Tishrei?
In Tishrei, there were a lot of farbrengens, because Tishrei is actually full of farbrengens. I mean, Tishrei, you have, of course, Rosh Hashanah, and then then, of course, later on came the Vov Tishrei, which started in Tavshin Chafei with, unfortunately, I have to say, with the passing of the Rebbe's mother, and that became a very, very special day, of course. The Rebbe farbrengen, the Rebbe said a Hadron, and then, other than that, throughout Sukkos. As I will tell you, but in Sukkos, the farbrengens were, there was always a farbrengen, Rebbe used to farbrengen on the first night of Chalamoid, and that Chalamoid Sukkos, and that farbrengen went back to the time of the previous Rebbe. It was advertised by the Merkos for Bnei Yeshiva, and then of course over the last days of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah.
Time Gedalia, anything special done?
Sim Gedalia was nothing more than the Rebbe came out to daven with the Olam. No, I don't remember anything. The Rebbe did. In later years, the Rebbe, especially after Tosh Ches, the Rebbe would speak at these occasions, speak from his podium, but in those years the Rebbe did not. Coming back to the days of Sezimei Tshuva, as I mentioned, we had the sixth day of Tishrei, and actually I could take up a lot of time talking about that because on the sixth day of Tishrei, when the Rebbe's mother was passed on, with Shabbos Kodesh, as it is, Kvias, as it is this year, I was actually standing, I would say, next to the Rebbe from the morning till at night. Until at night, so I have a lot to say about that, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it in at all in this particular